Dear respected teacher, dear noble community, today is the 8th of April, the year 2018, and we are in the spring retreat in Upper Hamlet for our day of mindfulness, a Sunday. We are a couple of days before the French retreat. Many people will come. But it seems like the two sisters Hamlet, they're still open for guests. The brothers are more lazy. We are giving this week open for our brothers and to organize for the retreat. So we'll be preparing for that. This year we're having a lot of retreats in Plum Village, and it seems like a lot of them are full. We have a 21-day retreat coming up too, Italian retreat, after the French retreat, and then the 21-day retreat, which is a 3-week retreat. And then the summer retreat, the summer opening, Thai likes to call it, 4-week retreat for the families. So for those of you who have family, think about bringing your family to Plum Village one day. That's the only time, that 1 month, that we have children running around. It's very beautiful. You never see our Hamlet like so crazy in a good way. Every year I always, when family retreat come, I pray that nobody gets hurt, running around. And the parents let the kids go, and the parents get to be free because the monks and nuns are taking care of their kids somewhere. Or sometimes the monks and nuns don't even take care of the kids and let both of them go, the parents and the kids. It's a very beautiful retreat if you ever want to come and see Plum Village with children. There are a few children here. Many families are moving closer to Plum Village, and this is wonderful. The monks and nuns, we love children, as you can imagine, because we don't have children, so we play with your children. But we're part-time. We know when to run away, And we are grateful to the parents because they cannot run away, right? We go take a nap, we run to our hammock, right? So we appreciate the father, the mother, and all the families in different ways, whether you have children or not. We come here and we support each other. So the Buddhist path is not like a meditation in the zendo on the cushion, kind of just seeking enlightenment, but it includes every aspect of our life, of our being. Whether in partnership, we're single, we have family, we have grandparents to take care of. So this is Thai's vision for the practice. So that's why he emphasized so much on community to create. So Thai's his whole life he tried to renew Buddhism, to make it relevant, especially to our families, to our partners, to our children, so that it is useful. In Vietnamese, we never say Buddhism by itself. We say Dao Phật. Dao is the way or the path, and Phật is the Buddha. So, we never say Phật, tell Phật, we say tell Dao Phật. So follow the path of the Buddha or the Buddha's path. So I think that's more in line with my what attracted me to the teaching, to see Buddhism not as a religion, not as a philosophy, but as a path to travel on. So when we say, we shouldn't say, I'm a Buddhist. And like, no, I follow the Buddhist path. And to know that we're traveling on a path is very helpful. When you travel on a path, you don't need to believe anything. You travel on it or you don't travel on it. It's very simple. There's no belief, You travel on the path, and you fall, you get up, you move, you get strayed from the path, you get back on the path. For me, that is very useful, very clear, and anyone can apply this. Not just meditators, but parents, partners, children as well. So this is something we want to continue to develop the Buddhist path. And the path here is, many of us have come here looking for something, right? Maybe we think there's something in there we got to figure out. And Thầy reminds us that the path is not, just going outward, but the path is the turn inward. So this is the spiritual path. It's not an external path that we see. It is a spiritual path, an internal path. Thai's calligraphy, the way out is in. You've seen that? Sounds very like it could be for a commercial or something. The way out is in. The next fashion, right? But the way out is in is very clear. Sometimes we think that, we're going there to find something. But all we do here, all the Buddhist teaching, is to help us find our awakened nature, our way out, inside. We call it introspection, contemplation, meditation. These things, they all deal with coming inward. Coming in where? Into our body, coming back to our body, coming back to our mind. So we need to know this basic thing. So all the books you can read, all the retreats you can go, but if you're not doing that, finding that teacher within you, then it's not necessarily the Buddhist path. So listening to a Dharma talk is like that. There's nothing for us to get. So we sit and we allow the Dharma to touch us, to penetrate us. And whatever we resonate with will stay. We don't need to take notes. We just let it feel. So there's a different kind of training. Is to trust that whatever it is that needs to bloom, it will bloom in its time. So the Dharma, the spoken Dharma, is just like rain, just watering the seeds that are already within us. So when you come to Plum Village, be careful about looking for answers and getting consultations so you can get it, and question and answer and so on. There's a more subtle a way of training, which is a little bit more quiet, more observation, more feeling. And we need to learn to do this. Every time you hear the bell, invited in the meditation hall or outside, we stop and we follow our breathing. We relax. We come back to our body. You see, inward. If you feel any tension in our body, relax. And you feel any tension in our mind, any anxiety, any stress, any rushing, any heaviness in our mind, you feel it. So we train to feel every time we hear the bell, and we use the breath to as an anchor, like a string. With each breath, we pull our mind that's been running back closer, closer. So this is a very subtle training, because we're so in a habit to think and to use our cerebral, rationalize and knowing things. So there's a deeper knowing that has nothing to do with this part. It's sometimes not very rational. You just feel it. How do you feel that you're rushing? When you're rushing, your body is very clear, right? But when you stop, how do you feel that your mind is rushing? You have to know that. How do you feel that you're wanting something? You want to grasp something. You have to know that in your mind. You have to know what it feels like. It's a little subtle, but it is the the cream of meditation, of mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice is not just to appease whatever you're going through, but mindfulness practice can help you train to feel and touch. In Vietnamese, there's a word tiếp xúc, chạm. That's very, I like that better. It's kind of translated to touch. You touch something. When you contemplate, you don't think about it. You touch it. The object could be an apple. Oh, this is not organic. Oh, it's made. We got it from Leclerc. Oh, it's green. Oh, how come we have apples now? It must be not seasoned. But touching an apple, you're present. So it's not the thinking. You cut it. So our senses help. Our eyes, our smell, our ears. So touching something, we can use our senses more. When we do walking meditation, learn to feel. Don't think about walking, huh? Just feel your body walking, feel nature. Allow your senses to receive, to touch nature. See, touch, how do you touch something? You can touch your father. You can hold your hand together, you can touch your mother. You see, the mind is very powerful. And this is bringing an object and being mindful of it. So being mindful of it is being able to be present to it and touching it. And this we need to train. We need to learn how to do this. In school, we'll learn how to take notes, to read, to research, to reference, to synthesize ideas. I've been trained like that. But that's just one level of being in the world. There's another way of being in the world where you don't use any of that ability. Just close your eyes, you breathe. You can close your eyes or you can keep it open. Sit and enjoy the tree in front of you or the sunset. And train yourself not to think about the sunset. Every breath can hold us. Keep our mind there. Because our tendency is to actually start to think about the sunset. Or nowadays it's actually to look up something on our gadget. I'm starting to have a habit like that because I have a phone now. And it's very strong. We have access to a lot of information now. It's very easy, right? You can find out facts about everything. So again, triggering this kind of information. So in meditation, we learn to come back with the bell, with our steps, and to be present. Being present is touching. When you eat, you learn to be present and touch the food. experience the food, experience the eating. Not your thinking, fully present. Your mind and your body, touch, contact, experiencing something. In Buddhist practice, we emphasize a lot on direct experience. That is the power of Zen. In Zen tradition, you're using a lot of thinking, and it's not really direct. You're not present. You're probably going to get a good lesson that you'll never forget. So direct experience, boom. You're present and you're fully alive with the food, really experiencing it, as if you're doing it for the first time. When we drink a cup of water, train yourself how precious is a cup of water. When you wash your hands, so in your time here, in your week here, in your month or years here, this is what we do here. We train to be present and to touch whatever we're doing in the present moment. And this is nothing, this is a more complicated way of saying just being alive, right? Being alive is you're a human, living, sensing being, right? We're not a vegetable. We're actually vegetable senses too. We're finding out the trees and stuff, they have a whole complex way of sensing now, communicating as well. But humans, we have like the five senses, right? So we train ourselves to use that. And I'll share today a little bit more about the subtleties of our mind, so you can be aware of it and know how to train in it. In our tradition, we emphasize a lot on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So I won't go in detail about those for those who are new, but I wanted to just point out a few things to help us in practicing on a more subtle level, so that we're not bringing the habit of thinking and rationalizing and getting, but to come inward and have trust. And you can become your own teacher that way. You begin to know how to train. In the Buddhist teaching, there's in the sutra, I'll paraphrase that. I love this quote, or I'll paraphrase. There is nothing more harmful, useless, that brings more suffering than an untrained, unrefined mind. You heard of that. There's another one. What is most destructive and useless, right? An untrained, uncultivated mind. The Buddha shared it in different sutras, but he also shared, what is then? There's nothing more beneficial, useful, that brings great happiness and peace than a trained and refined mind. I enjoy the Buddhist path, particularly in the mind training, in training our... I like to watch, not just my mind, but I like to watch mine outside too, the habits. So I'll draw up a little bit about the Buddhist path. What is the Buddhist path? Sometimes it is referred to as the Eightfold Path. I'll go quickly over it because I want to emphasize on some aspects of it. So we have one here. So there's 8 parts to the path. And I think on the top here, right view, and right thinking, right speech. This kind of review for some of you, right speech, right action. And from action we have kind of right livelihood. And over here we have right concentration, right mindfulness. And here we have right diligence. So this is the famous Eightfold Path. Can you see over there? I guess you can, sorry, can't angle it over for you. Today I'd like to talk about right impressions, and it comes around here. And around here, there are impulses. And as I practice in the path, I realize that these are very subtle. I started noticing it when I lived in Plum Village, and we don't get to hear rock music or like folk music, the kind of music I listened to when I was growing up or in college, and it's like been years since I listened to it. And then we would go on tour, or like I would somehow hear it. I'll hear all of a sudden a song from when I was in school, in university, and all of a sudden, wow, all kinds of memories came again. I was like, oh my God. You know that happens? Yeah, songs do that, right? Or like some brother would ask me about a movie from then, like in the 90s, you know, and I just can't remember what happened, or that movie. It's like so far. Huh? But then we'd start talking about it. It's like, oh, yeah. And then, you see the impression? It's incredible what our mind can retain. And this is my first kind of attention to the subtleties of what impresses my mind. I used to watch, I didn't like it, but we watch a lot of horror movies. And I used to get scared of the dark, you know? That's a very clear example of like there's nothing dangerous, but like you cannot sit in the forest. Like I used to go in Deer Park in California. There's a place down in the Sisters Hamlet. Before all the monks and nuns came, there were only 3 of us. But there's an area where the oak trees had fallen, and in the moonlight, they looked like skeleton, yeah? Like big, gigantic dinosaur skeleton. And I used to be very scared, and I had to walk from the Sisters because I stay up late working. And then I have to walk back to the Brothers, which is up in the gatehouse. And there's an area where there's like a little valley, and that's where all the oak trees are. And in the moonlight, it's very scary. And so I used to sit there on a log and watch my fear. And I remember feeling all this like crazy ideas come up. I'm like, Jesus. And I would breathe with it, and I would, every sound would like, and a new movie would come up, you know. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but don't do it anywhere dangerous, huh? But this is a very, very clear example of impressions. So these are the things I began to pay attention to, and I started also watching, like there's certain people that have an impression on you. And I used to sit and just kind of be with it, what it is, and watch. And impulses as well. So these are the things that, thinking is very clear, right? I'm going to think about it. I have a thought. But impressions and impulses, much more subtle. And it doesn't make sense sometimes. Impulses, very reactive. It's very subtle. Some of the impressions are stored in our mind, and we're no longer aware of it. So these are the things that I think with meditative practice of stilling our mind, we can begin to know more. We're so used to being active and being, one is active, being involved in things, and the other is constantly, our mind is stimulated. Therefore, it doesn't allow us to touch these kind of impressions that are, sometimes they're not so helpful. There may be a trauma or something tragic happened, but it wasn't released, so we store these. But because our active body and mind is constantly in our daily life, and I see this in living in the monastery play out. It's a kind of sometimes you don't know why, but you have to keep busy. And you have to keep running. Because you don't want to, you don't even know what it is yet, but you just don't know. Some people are afraid. In a 6-day retreat, during Dharma sharing, I watched this unfold many times. Friends, they come and they seem very, high esteem, very positive, very confident. But it's after 3-4 days, they're the one that will mostly cry, break. And this is over and over I watch, and this is what, and mostly what they share is that the slowing down. Now they cannot run away anymore, and it comes up. And the whole family, our 20 brothers and sisters, we can embrace it with a person. And it's the first time they ever can share their suffering, their impressions that they're holding. In our tradition, we sometimes call it internal knot. This is the impressions that are left in us, we call wounds, knots. And so we need to have time to take care of that. Some of the suffering you can say out loud with your rational mind. I don't like him, he's like that, he's done this to me. That is suffering. Very clear, right? Makes sense. Impressions doesn't work like that. It's very emotional, more subtle. So how do we practice with it? The meditation practice, first of all, it helps us to stop. So in the monastery, we learn to stop. When we walk, it's also stopping. So stopping here is not the physical, traditional, conventional stopping. Is stopping that energy. So when we hear the bell, everything we do, we learn to stop. We wash the dish, we are stopping. And when we stop, we recognize the second. You recognize what's in front of you. You recognize, that's very easy with our eyes. You recognize the bird, but recognize what's going on inside. Why am I rushing? It's going to be enough food, don't worry. Calm down. Even if you get a piece of rice, it's enough. I had this problem, I want to be, I time it so I'm not the first, but I'm not going to be the last. If you stop, you recognize that. Yeah? And you see that impulse, right? You don't see it if you don't stop. And you don't have the intention, the training to recognize. You stop and you have to call it. What's going on? I'm feeling anxious, too many people around. Breathe, use your breath, calm it down. So you recognize and you learn to calm. Calming or stilling. The mind has a lot of stimulation, impulses and reaction. When we learn and train to stop, recognize, and you train that to become a habit. Stop, recognize, calm. Every time you hear the bell, especially the clock in the dining hall, that's because it's kind of random. Even though it's 15 minutes and it's regular, but if you're ever in the dining hall and you're, and you have to stop. I remember the first time I came to Plum Village, very annoying. I was like, geez, I'm having such a good conversation, geez. And you feel the energy, and you feel the annoyance. I mean, you can't go throw the clock away. But you can feel kind of like, you hate being interrupted. I came from a culture where my friends and I, when we have conversation, it's like, who can get the, I don't know what you call it, but it's a way of speaking in the parts of the world where I come from. You have to, always have to be, now the young people call one up. You have to be one up. You can't be like left following someone's conversation. You have to, but and the more information, the more. So I had this energy of like used to conversation like that. I remember many times sitting in that dining hall, feeling that energy. I can still feel it now. Did you feel it? The way I spoke changed? Yeah, it's still very, I know you're there. So I have to sit down, eh? You're trained to sit down, take a breath. So these are very subtle. And you stay around here long enough and you see, everyone's got it. And it's okay. That's what makes us beautiful. We're a little bit, quirky, We all each have a little different impulses and different things that make us. But we don't allow it to overcome us or be burdened by our suffering or our tendencies and so on. This is what I love about Thai's practice. It's actually very kind, very, very human. But only if you want to change it. You can be, it's not a requirement. You can go through life and you don't have to do any of this. So that's what I like about it, It's like, it's up to you, You want to train? And another one I train in is non-reacting. That's the stillness. And I train mostly in this in meetings. I like to share because meetings were it was a challenge for me in the beginning. So I learned to make we meet a lot here. We meet more than we do sitting in Plum Village. I don't know if you know that, but sometimes we meet so much, we miss a whole line of brothers, It's like, where are the brothers? I mean, is this a meditation center? No, we do mostly our meditation in meetings. When it's meeting season, it's like morning meeting, afternoon meeting. Next day, morning meeting. Especially coming up for the retreats, we have to meet. So how do you make a meeting become a training? You learn not to react. And it's very difficult in the beginning. I used to have a type of doll here. I love telling the story where he was my roommate, and he taught me like every time it entered planning or architecture. I love to input because I was trained as an architect or anything to do with construction. And when he sees me about to share, he goes like this, like a hook, and that means he caught me like a fish. And I cannot speak. Oh! I shared this before, That was my training. He was my roommate, and I'd share with him, because I cause suffering sometimes. Because, my idea is always right, and I've been trained. I know because I'm an architect. You guys don't know anything. You guys are just a bunch of meditators. I hope that was not profanity. Did you translate that? I'm also, I apologize, I have a humor impulse, okay? I like to... I tried during the monastic retreat not to make people laugh, but I grew up with a lot of humor in my education. I'm trying to reduce it, but it's very hard. And so every time he did this, I had to keep up and be quiet. That's pretty hard, huh? Especially if you know you're right. And nobody knows because you can't share it. So some of the trainings you're practicing, eating, walking, those are great, huh? But you have not intended training in meetings. And this is very useful. I'm sure this could be very useful in families, don't you think? Not reacting when you're being blamed for something that you had no awareness of. And you have to listen and just keep your mouth shut. Yes, honey. Yes. Thank you. And then I learned from Thai, he invited us to call it by its true name. So that was very difficult. Because sometimes you don't know. And so I began to have to identify it. Thai invited us. You have 51 mental formation. Anger, jealousy, envy, happiness, joy. They're good. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not. But I remember the first time he invited us to identify them. There are more than 51. And I was like, oh, okay. So I began to identify it. And not necessarily with words, but to know how it feels. These impressions. I like the word impression. I just, for my own practice, because it's not thinking. And it might not have a word for it. But you have to start to make friends with it. It's an energy. The internal knot sometimes is just an energy. So learning to stop, learning to recognize, learning to calm, and don't react. That means don't judge it. Don't say, oh, this is a bad, oh, this is good, oh, more of this. Not reacting means practicing mere awareness, being with it, touching it. And when you touch it deeply, you will identify it. If you don't know what it is in terms of the energy, you can give it a name. I like Bob. Hi, Bob. That's my, it's kind of like a very subtle, it's a kind of, I don't know what you call it, it's a kind of confidence, you know? It's a little bit more than confidence, it's a little bit, I have that in me, it's a little bit, in English they call it cocky. It's a little bit, I have that, you can probably feel it a little bit. It's kind of like a arrogance. It's a confidence. I used to get in trouble in school with that a lot. It's a kind of overconfidence, and you make people not like you. You know, I get that from. I know where I get that from. My family. I don't want to say who because she might be watching. Hi, Mom. I'm speaking for the future too, you know. But it's okay, you know. It's you know, I try not to make people suffer with it. But that's the one I call Bob. And I make some of my brothers suffer sometime with that. So with impulses and impressions, one thing that helped me was begin to see the patterns. Like in meetings, I know what will come up. That's a pattern. There's situations that will make these impulses, right? There's a afternoon when you come home, there's a pattern. So you have to find out patterns in your impulses and your tendencies. It's great, huh? This is the path. This is the path of finding out how your mind works. Only if you want to. You can totally be oblivious and still be happy. It's no requirement. And what is this? We also have certain energies in us that are stored in tension in our body as knots. And I remember I had some. It was like the back over here, and yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I went to see all kinds of doctors, acupressure and so on, but did yoga, did this, but I began to notice that when I get over busy or I get stressed or I work too hard and I'm not taking care of myself, basically not relaxed, it starts to make a noise. Right now it's not making a noise. Thank you, Buddha. But when I get, I'm not taking care of myself. And I strive and I try to do. I have that tendency to. Don't have that a name for it, but I know that is a tendency, a kind of impulse of me to be busy and to strive. I grew up in a culture where success was very important. So I strive very hard as a monastic to, be on top of it. So this caused a lot of bodily tension. And it stores in certain places. So these are the, and it, it becomes like a little tight knot. So these impulses have a effect on our body. And this is also related to trauma. 2 to 6 years old, we have no other way of handling it. So in child development, they identify that their emotion is developing, the children. So when they get shocked emotionally, they don't know how to handle it, so the energy is stored somewhere. And we need to be aware of this, and it's all releasable with the practice. Identify, learn how to. And in Buddhist practice, Buddhist path, the way for liberation, release, or salvation, Thai likes to say, is through insight, right view. Right view, when you identify it, when you know its nature and its cause, that is the beginning of having a more correct view about something. My anger towards my father, but as soon as I begin to understand him, to understand where that anger comes from, the expectation, and I begin to look more deeply and see that he also loved me. He's trying. He lost everything, depressed. These are the conditions that make who he is. So when you begin to have more understanding, more right view, or different angles, then slowly the knot of anger. So when I see my father in the house, I don't tighten up. I don't go running to my door. I remember my brothers and I, we live in the house, but actually we live from door to door. Front door to our room. Front door to our room. Our room to the front door. But this is something, there's something there. There's a kind of a subtlety we avoid. I remember the first time I became a monk and I came back to visit. Actually, the second visit, I learned to be in my house. And what was I doing? I was learning to appease and to relax that childhood knot. There's certain areas in the house where you don't sit. It's called the living room. You don't stay there, because there's going to be an argument. That was my fear. Around the dining hall, around the dining table, because, I grew up with a lot of back and forth. So as a child, I didn't know how to handle that. And so I had this fear of it. And I remember sitting in the couch in the living room, just looking outside the window. And I remember this very well because I saw the fly screen, is the door, but it's a net, and you slide it to keep the flies out. And I remember seeing that, it is like a patch, like there's a cut piece, and then I'm sure it was my daddy. He sewed another piece into it, and he sewed it, and then another piece. And so he fixed this screen, fly screen, for like maybe 4 or 5 times. And I remember looking at the fly screen and feeling, God, what kind of a man would do that? I mean, just go to Home Depot, get a new one. But I felt a lot of love for my father. It's like we're over here talking about climate change, reducing consumption, and I come home and I see my father, trying to fix a fly screen. And sitting there, I'll never forget. And I think that was you see? The knot? This is how it feels like when it begins to. Is very real. can't tell you, I didn't take notes, but it will never leave me. That's the way of meditation. When you have the insight, you don't need to take notes. You don't need to go home and, you don't need to... Those are the gems of meditation. And that is the path. And you impose this impression, the more you understand where they come from, it will change the way you are in the world, how you speak, how you act, and even how you think about other people, especially the ones who are causing some suffering. Because you begin to see nobody wants to be like that. No one wants to hate. No one wants to harm. It's their childhood, the way they're raised, the culture, what we promote, made them. We are co-responsible. Right thinking. Right thinking is into being, seeing ourselves in the other, and seeing the co-responsibility. This can only, it makes sense, right? But it's different when it's impulse. It's all makes sense now, but wait until you're in front of a situation. You see where the training needs to happen? See, right thinking is great. Yeah, you can have it in your note, but it's not going to help you. That's why we need to train. Because this stuff happens on a more subtle level. Very quick is the manas. Have time to get into manas. So remember, in meditation is not knowing, it's learning to be with it, to be. Don't focus on the knowing. Question and answers sessions, consultation, be careful of trying to know something. The Buddhist path, you know it. If you know how to be with it, recognize it, calm it down, identify it. To be, to feel, and to touch. These are the better words for the meditative experience, the mindfulness experience. When your mind is there, you're present, you're there with it, being with it. You see, so I'm just using language here to help you be a little bit more subtle and be a little bit more careful as we learn more about the mind training. I'll just quickly share a little bit about some of the, how do you call it? Why there's that tendency in us to protect and to run away from our suffering. And also to seek pleasure. There's an area of our mind in the Buddhist teaching, the Buddhist psychology teaching, called manas. M-A-N-A. And I'll just quickly share that manas is now quickly in Buddhist psychology, our mind is represented as a circle sometime, and down here we have store consciousness, and up here we have mind consciousness. And manas is another consciousness here, is in between here. So I think some of you know this already. So our mind is an aspect, and we have 5 sense doors, right, where we get impressions. Through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, and our body, our touching. This is how we get impression, right? This is the movie. You watch, it comes in. You hear, it comes in. You taste, good. So this is one way. There's another part where it's the mind consciousness. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 6th part of the mind. This is the 7th part. And this is the 8th part. So in Buddhist psychology, when I discovered this, I loved it. They see the mind as another sense organ. You see, it's very obvious that you see your eye is the sense organ, right? It can sense, it can take stimulus. You see, and then there's an object. So there's a sense organ, sense object, and when you look at it, it makes a sense, an eye consciousness, an eye sense, what we call sight. So it's very basic. I'm going very quickly. You come back to the 21-day retreat and we'll teach more of that. There's a plug for 21. And you hear, this is a sense organ. You hear a sound, that's the sound, the object, right? And you hear, and your mind hears sound. But if there's no object, what do you hear? This is the cool part. The mind is also a sense organ. And when I discovered that, it was like, wow. I was like experimenting it like crazy. I closed my eyes, like, well, I can still see with my mind. They call it the mind's eye, right? See, now, that's your mind as a sense organ. Mind organ. And what does the mind like to look at? Thoughts. When you have a thought, make a thought right now. Like, ooh, I hope they have tofu today. Or tempeh. I mean, I need some protein. How's another thought, you know? That is, learn to train that. That is the stuff. Gotta watch your mind organ. When it starts to think, what is it thinking? What is it making? Why are you thinking of her now? Why are you thinking of him now? Because that flower, it reminds me when I gave her like Valentine's Day 20 years ago. Oh. You see? And then, how does it feel now? Makes me feel lonely. You see how it works. This is very key to training. This for me helped me begin to, I moved from my father to my mother to my grandmother to my office to the world to the presidents to the governments to the strangers. Once you know how this works, the way you are at the grocery store waiting in line is very different. You wait in line. You're always looking for the shortest one. You see who, you kind of like summarize how much they have. And that one's, no, this one is going to be longer. And then you see that one go faster. You see? Your mind organ, all in your head. Why do you all of a sudden feel, I had to do this. I lived in a city where time is precious. Don't need to be waiting in line to buy something. That was a strong habit I had. Which line? Okay, this one. And I remember thinking, oh. And they start to go further up, like, man, I guess wrong. And then all of a sudden, impulse, tension. Breathe. Recognize. Chill out, man. It's going to save you 5 minutes. Identify my tendency. Always press for time. Where does this come from? My family have been running from war for many generations. My grandparents ran from China. My father, my mother ran from Vietnam. Now I run from America. I hope I don't have to run from Plum Village. Yeah? It's ancestral. I don't have a name for it, but I know my being busy comes from my ancestor. So this manas here, it likes to have ideas. And what is this object? The object is its own mind. What we call myself, who I am. Thai calls manas the lover. It's cool, huh? He uses and the tendency, the character of manas, first it seeks pleasure. That's his first tendency. I mean, we all like to have a good time. We don't like to suffer, right? We like to come to Plum Village not to suffer. You come here to suffer? No, you come here to have a good time. Maybe find some peace. Then something happens. Oh my God. A suffering comes up. And it has a tendency to seeks pleasure and it avoids suffering. Avoid suffering. This we need to recognize. If we don't understand this, this is what the Four Noble Path, the Four Noble Truth points at. We don't really, not everything is suffering, but there is some. It could be habits, tendencies, impulses, obsession. You're not suffering from food and war right now, shelter. But there's a modern kind of suffering, anxiety, stress, resentment, depression, different mental suffering. And we need to recognize it and learn to take care of it. Third characteristic of manas is that it does not recognize the goodness of suffering. This is, for me, very unique in Buddha's teaching as well as Thai, how he asks us not to think of suffering as something that we got to get rid of, but is there for us to use, to understand, and from that, we can find liberation. So my suffering in my family and so on moved me to the path. My resentment helped me to understand and grow compassion for another human being. So it's not to get rid of suffering, but it's to learn how to take care of it. And there is a goodness to suffering. How many of you are here because of some kind of, I don't want to use the suffering because nobody is going to raise their hand. How many of you here because you have been challenged by something? Huh? Yeah? I went to a retreat just because my mother said, I cannot continue to live like this. You're having a lot of problem with your dad. You better go, let's come on a retreat. And so it's actually, so the goodness of suffering, it helps us, puts us into effort. So not to avoid it. And the fourth is recognize the danger of, I forgot to put sensual pleasure, more like it. There's certain pleasure, it's enjoyable, it's not so harmful, but there are some that can actually move us on the wrong path. This is something very important now in our society. But I think in the last 6 months, there's a lot of breakdown of people in high position, wealth and fame and power, right? They underestimated the hook of sensual pleasure. Yeah, look in the news, identify, recognize, call it. What is it in terms of the impulse? Sexual craving, one. Power, dominance over others. You have to, when you read the news, the Buddhist way of looking at it is where is this on the path? Craving, hatred, ignorance. Every newspaper you have to identify. So it doesn't water that in you. How do you receive the news, huh? The fifth one is does not. I'll just put moderation, okay? There's a practice of moderation. You hear this a lot in the Buddhist training, especially monastic training. Learn to be in moderation, and that's I didn't like that at the beginning. I remember, especially with food. I share this a lot because it's a really big part of my training as a novice. I didn't have food problem until I came to Plum Village, and I recognize it's because we live here. It's very boring. I don't get to go to the movies. I don't go dancing. No movies. So the only sensual pleasure I get 3 times a day. Wow, let's get to food. Especially when my brothers cook spicy food, and so I began to really first crave and also be very afraid to go to the line, because you're standing in the line and you're you have to put effort not to because our training is not to take only the good food. That's part of our training as a novice monk. But afterwards, you can do whatever you want, Then you suffer for it. But at the beginning, my mentor said, our practice is not to just look for the good food. And I was like, God, I wish he'd never told me that. And then I had a problem with good food. And I never had a problem with it. Food is food. But like I remember waiting in line and making a mountain out of nothing, I was like, okay, just one. I was like, okay, how about another one? You see the tension I had? Because that grasping is very strong for pleasure. My mouth is watering. Impulse. Tofu with a little pepper and sugar and soy sauce. Especially when my brother Phap Dung cooks it. Excellent. If he's cooking, I know. Phap Dung's cooking today, huh? All right. Who's watering in their mouth right now? I am. See how easy it is? It's okay though, don't beat yourself. That's being recognized, and you get to choose. I love that part of the practice. Recognize and choose. She's very beautiful. You choose. Don't need to hang on to it. Oh, he's very interesting. You recognize and you move. So this is very subtle. And I learned that while standing there on the line, getting food. And learning to be at ease with it. And another thing I have to say that helped is I began to find more joy and happiness in other places. So food practice only became just one thing. It's just one practice. I'm not good at it yet. It still brings me some tension, but that's not all my practice. I'm doing other things. So I have to just let you know that that's not your whole world. Don't be obsessed about it. Or you're having a difficulty, you're dealing with a really strong something right now in your relationship, in your family, but that's not the whole entire thing. There are other things. So we need to also find, so that's moderation, huh? Moderation in food, moderation in transformation, moderation in knowing, that's enough. I don't have to be reflecting on my suffering every day. Take a break. Go enjoy the sunshine. Go bike riding with your brothers. So I learned also to find other sources of nourishment for the healing to happen, for the impulses to getting other impulses and getting other impressions. This is what we call appropriate attention in the Buddhist technical, yoniso manasikara, is knowing what is appropriate and finding that as well. So the food practice, I learned to be in moderation, and that helped me later on to be in moderation with sensual pleasure, with food, with happiness, with joy. Okay, I had a lot of joy today. In the evening, quiet down. Don't go looking for more. You don't need to visit another room of a brother to play music. Just sit on your own. So I begin to learn to run for joy and brotherhood. Okay, I had enough brotherhood. Need to go and be still. And also be in moderation of being by yourself. You see? I like to be myself, quiet, nobody disturb me, nothing gets triggered. I'm at peace. There's too much of that. You need to go out there and get your buttons pushed a little bit, and then go home and do some composting. So moderation is not just with, it's also with your feelings and your mind. Huh? This is a kind of tendency. It could be that we are also using the practice to hide as well. So be careful. And this is very subtle, because you're here to practice, and it's good that you're going to the meditation hall, but only you know if you're hiding away from social interaction. That one is a hard one. Yeah, you're fine, but I'm not sure that you're at peace sitting there for over an hour. So this is very subtle. And this we need to know, and we need to find the source of it and find the medicine. Nobody's going to tell us. It's only us stopping so we can recognize, and our view of it, our insight of it. So wait, what's the word for? I think my sister used for using meditation as a way of escaping. There's a word they use. I forget nowadays. Is a not escapism, but something like bypassing. That's it. That's a new key word in the Buddhist circle. Buddhist meditation as a bypassing. It's kind of like a car. You're like, I'm not going there. I'm going to find peace somewhere else. You know? So we have to be careful. But practice is good, much better than busying yourself with consumption and stimulation. So just be careful with that. And the only thing that will help you is stopping and recognizing. Really. And not just in the meditation hall, on the cushion, but the places where you are reactive, impulse. I liked watching people in the mudroom, how they take off their shoes and put on their clothes, and there's a lot of interesting things that happen there. It's very, so watch that. So pay attention to transition places. The door here to the dining hall, the dining hall out to the bell tower for a meeting, walking meditation, lining up for something from your room, inside your room. So I discovered there's certain places where I can see a little bit my tendency. There's no bypass. Every moment, you have that ability to see. So I'll just wrap up here by sharing that some of us love to build community and so on. And we like to be part of a group and to maybe start leading sanghas and community. Or some of us might be in the office working, and I've been following the news a little bit since the last 6 months and watching the kind of like breakdown of power structures, and it's so beautiful what's happening. Women, rising up and speaking their voice, and the oppression and sexual abuse and so on. And I've been reflecting on why that happens, And I've been reflecting on the people in power position. And I was asking myself, what does that have to do with my own suffering? And I began to see that there's a danger to being put on a place of influence, of what you call power. In Buddhist, in monastic life, we're not looking for power, but in subtlety, we are kind of sometimes want to be in a position of like influence, or like if you're running a Sangha, you're all of a sudden the facilitator. And there's a danger to that when you're put into a leadership role. And that is, there's some temptation that has to do with manas. And is a temptation that comes with success. Basically, I summarized it. When you're successful, whether you make money, you have more power, or you have more fame, there's a hook to it. You have to identify it. And it's also very subtle, especially if it's with Sangha or with Dharma, and it's spiritual. But after the fourth or fifth time people admire you, you start to feel, there's a price to that, and we need to recognize it. And this is what happens on the corporate world, in the entertainment industry. And this is a shame, a shame. Maybe they were not like that. But because they succeed and they became a little bit more influential, more famous, you can see slowly the temptation was too much for them to resist. You begin to look at the nature of suffering. There is suffering, there is abuse. What is the root cause of that abuse? You have to spend time. Don't just, our society, we elevate, right? We elevate power, success, status. We admire. And we, especially with sexual impulses and tendencies and impressions in the movies, in the internet, and so on. So, who's to blame? Who's the victim? I think that reflection helped me to, it gives me energy to really, go out and share and to practice moderation, stopping, recognizing that there is a hook there, there is a danger to be in a place of leadership, of facilitatorship, right? People start to come, and then you have a thought, impression, then you have another, and then slowly you begin to lose your path. And that's why it's so important for us, and Thay's emphasized to have friends, to have community, to have feedback, and to have rotation. So this is Thay's, I think he saw it coming, our culture of so much temptation and stimulus that we need in the spiritual community to have balance, to check and balance, right? To have, and the 5 mindfulness training as well. I think some of you might know, those are our guidelines for practicing mindfulness. The 5 mindfulness training, the 5 foundation of the path. So the 5 mindfulness training is nothing other than the path. So in terms of wealth, it's not accumulating while so many are in need, in poverty. I remember having a bank account when I was coming out of college, getting into work, and already paying attention to, it makes you greedy. It makes you not think of other people. When you start looking at your monthly, what do you call it? Those things, it tells you how much is it. The more I pay attention to it, I think the thought was to just think I better have enough for the future, just in case. So the second mindfulness training to help us share, to help us not accumulate, especially not to steal and not to be exploitive. of other people, of people in less, that are working for us more correctly. There's a way to exploit them. And we might be doing it subtly, in subtle ways. And I think meditation can help us. It's like, how much more do you want in your bank account? In terms of power and influence, we might use that position to kill another person's life force, their inspiration, their wanting to contribute. They might be in the Sangha, they might be in your workplace, they might be in your family. But there's many ways to kill, not just with a knife or a gun, but with our mind, our thinking, our way we speak. So we can really put someone's life force down, especially in the office. I remember we worked in the office, and it's like the jungle. You know, who's got the projects, and who's got the boss's attention, who's on his, there's something happening. This is the power struggle that we need to, and sometimes it could happen in the Sangha as well, a kind of jealousy, and you have to, this is a spiritual practice. This is not, organizational system. I'm sharing this, hoping that our Sangha begin to look at this, that it doesn't come into the spiritual community, the difficulties that happens in our worldly society. And of course the sensual tendency, that's kind of like very blatant. Now with the media so open and so available, accessible. But there's no, check and balance, there's no restraint, there's no moderation. So the messages that we're sending to our young people, to women, to men, it's going to leave impression. It's going to allow certain tendencies. What is acceptable now, is quite different. I have a feeling the more I practice, I'm becoming more a traditionalist. I used to be quite, but, ignorance, they say, is bliss, right? It's like, God, I wish nobody told me this. Now I can't really have pleasure whenever I want. I'm really surprised at myself sometimes. It's like, wow. Because, I used to grow up in the city and, party was part of my daily activity. I mean, no, weekend activity. And I don't mean to sound like a traditionalist. I don't know if I want to go in there, but how did I get out here? The Buddhist path is to look at suffering, and we have to call it as it is, know where it comes from, and find out if you want. That's why that's my disclaimer, and not forcing you on this path. I'm trying to be very careful here, not to tell you what to do, because it's not about that. It's about knowing what is beautiful, what is good, and what is true. And I was a little bit deluded about what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. The way I buy things to decorate myself, and I went for things that I thought was good for me, but actually was very harmful. I was immoderate in my lifestyle. So I think those are some tendencies that we have. So I hope you spend your week, spend your time here in Plum Village to nourish your joy, your happiness, your peace, your stillness. So the practice of healing and transformation there's also nourishment and thriving. So healing and transformation, that is only one practice. You're not here just to heal. Some of you, don't just focus on that. We also need nourishment. Where are you going to get the energy? Physically, physiologically, and psychologically to heal if you are not getting nourishment. It's like a wound that does, you're not having the proper body care, your wound will not heal. So it's a kind of don't make it into two things. What do you call it? Make it into die something. Make it into a conflicting, dividing those two things. They go together, like suffering and happiness. There is suffering, but there's not only suffering. So be aware of this as we are traveling on the path to heal, to nourish. We are also traveling on the path to nourish right thinking, right speech, right action. So when we do walking meditation, it's not just to heal, it's also to, there's no distinction, you see? When you breathe in and you feel the birds singing, there's something happening that is more than what you can know. So that I invite you to trust that a little bit more, rather than just healing and transformation and trying to figure it out. That is cerebral. In the meditative practice is more. That's, I think, my main message today is I hope you can practice in a way that is a little more letting go of what you're used to, which is to get it. Who's got the answer? Can I have a meeting with a monk or a nun? No, you have the answer. If you know how to stop, to recognize, to calm, to still, and then to call it, to identify. That is the basic tool on the path. Oh, I'm swaying off. Come back to the path. So if you've taken the 5 mindfulness training, it is not something you believe in. The certificate that you get is the tool for the path. Every 2 weeks you take it out, you read it with the Sangha or yourself. What is that? It's to check in. One word will stick. I remember doing this as a young, growing up, and I took when I was still a layperson and reading, and some words will pop out that month, and I'm not very nice lately. The 4th mindfulness training. It's like, why am I not so nice in the office lately? It's because reading the 5 mindfulness training, we're making it a pattern, and then it will review things. That's why the rhythm, the schedule, the regularity of the monastery life is the boringness of it, the blandness of it, not so much stimulation, is very good. You come here slowly, and then you see, like, You see, having a pattern, a habit, a regularity of something, boom. There's a tendency to say, I'm going to skip meditation today. Why? I like laying in my room. Laziness. I recognize that. I like to be in my room. Nah. There's a lot of people here. Who's gonna know? I mean, you cannot look. You don't have to look at it, so you don't have to identify it. That's why I kind of think it's kind of true. Ignorance is bliss. So I'll end that here. If you want to be blissful, you know what to do. But there's another path. So I was once like that. And I have to share with you my experience today. It's fun too, okay? I'm sorry to make it serious. I'm seeing some of you kind of getting serious. It's also fun. I brought joy into my practice, and to treat things with a little bit more tight taught me that. He always say, "Oh, let's go take a walk." You take a walk. Every time I see Thai, and I'm going to share my suffering, and let's go for a walk. And then we come back, and I don't have any more question. And Thai, very subtle, huh? That is our teacher. He doesn't tell you, oh, you suffer because you... I come to him, he knows, let's go take a walk, con. Thôi, thầy cho mình đi dạo nha. And he take me, I come back and I start to see, trying to avoid suffering and trying to fix it too quickly, huh? So it's bringing a lightness and being patient with it, moderation. So thank you for being here and traveling the path with all of us. And we wish you a wonderful day today, beautiful spring blooming. So allow spring, the flower in you, to bloom, and the birds, they're building their nests inside of you. You grow with the season and be the season. So when we do walking meditation, don't be in your head. Don't think, especially like things that that you triggered here. Just walk and be spring. Yeah, thank you for listening and practicing with us.